final metaphysical lesson on this tape in the Academy of Self series is titled The Ultimate Reality Within the Great Illusion. It is the actualization of spiritual consciousness, the psychology of autonomy, by Gordon Gardner. To be free from limitation and ignorance requires a spiritual consciousness which can perceive the one reality within, behind, above, beyond, and throughout the illusion. A person with a spiritual consciousness knows that the natural things of the material world are simply the lower vibration of spiritual thoughts, and no more than a great illusion, representing a greater reality. This simply means that spiritual energy is the substantiating essence of any and all material form, regardless of whether the form is mineral, plant, animal, human, or higher being. There are many forms that will always remain invisible to the eyes of flesh, which can be seen through the psychic eye of spiritual consciousness. The psychic eye is the single eye or third eye of a spiritual being. An integral human being is always tending towards a more highly developed lucidity, which is both penetrating and far-seeing. Such a person is a spiritual being who has opened the single eye which is rooted in eternity. The brilliant splendor of divine light flows into their brain from the core of their spiritual being, which is centered in the universal mind of the solitary Godhead, where the infinite love, the eternal truth, and the absolute wisdom abide in a holistic, incorruptible state. The love, truth, wisdom essence is the inherent substance of all natural untainted form. This three-in-one essence is the creative force within, behind, above, beyond, and throughout all of the pure earth. The spiritual consciousness of the Godhead is the immortal life which actuates and animates all spiritual beings with the purifying fire of undying ardor. The Godhead is not a Father in a distant heaven. It is not a crucified Son upon a bloody cross, nor can it be thought of as an enigmatic Holy Ghost of Roman Catholicism. The Godhead is the everywhere present consciousness, life, love, truth, wisdom, spirit, power, which are the seven essential cosmic attributes that are inseparable from any and all of the existent form which consummates the great illusion. The solitary Godhead is the greater reality and absolute authority within, behind, above, beyond, and throughout any and all integral human beings, inasmuch as they have evolved a spiritual consciousness. How they evolved a spiritual consciousness is quite simple. They merely aborted the ego self of personality, which resulted in the dissolution of all their cherished ideas, ideals, ideologies, beliefs, concepts, opinions, assumptions, and conclusions. This abortion and dissolution of seeming reality replaced self-consciousness with the spiritual consciousness of the Godhead as the only authority in the lives of these integral human beings. The solitary Godhead, as the absolute authority, is the great illusionist and cosmic functionary which unfolds spiritual consciousness into material awareness from within each and every form. Consciousness, as the first of the seven essential cosmic attributes, is a condition of turbulent, fiery sonorousness which is gentled by a movement-like sound when the other six attributes are instilled with the inclination to create an effect within the mind of the cosmos. All of form is imbued with the all-penetrating mind of the cosmos, inasmuch all of form is immersed in it, and this universal mind is the spiritual consciousness of the solitary Godhead. This means that any form is imbued with and immersed in the Godhead, whether the form is a complete microcosm or the whole macrocosm. In other words, the spiritual consciousness, which is the Godhead, is the solitary creator, all that is created, and the totality of creation, thereby making the creator-created creation a single, interrelated, cosmic event which is transpiring here and now. Creation, therefore, is not something that happened once upon a time, like the Genesis myth suggests. Creation is a perpetual happening that is everlastingly and without interruption taking place where and when the boundless here intersects the interminable now, without a before or an after, and without a beginning or an ending. In the everlasting is the spiritual consciousness, and the spiritual consciousness is with the Godhead, and the spiritual consciousness is the Godhead. The Godhead is the ultimate reality, which is forever being made manifest as the great illusion, and all integral human beings, inasmuch as they have evolved a spiritual consciousness, are each in their turn a great illusionist. The incorruptible spiritual realm is the real, while the untainted material universe is the ideal. The corrupt, tainted world of inhumane humanity, however, is neither real nor ideal, because it is a fabrication of constricted mortal minds bent on evasion and denial. The reactive conditioned mortal mind of ignoble mankind evades the truth and denies the spirit, because their determined intellects continue to do battle with their capricious emotion. The bias and bigotry of all man-made ideologies, they are all man-made, shape the letter that killeth, in the form of written so-called gospel that claim to be the custodians of truth. The eternal truth that frees the human spirit, inasmuch as it is eternal, can never be expressed in ephemeral language, written or spoken. The truth attained through reasoning, since they are not eternal, can be written and spoken, but the most avid academic will never be set free from the accumulation of such learning. An illiterate pagan has a far greater opportunity to be set free through the profound simplicity of receptivity to the eternal truth, which abides in its fullness at the inmost center of spiritual consciousness. Simply because pagans are unlettered and ignorant of books, holy or otherwise, they are not likely to be contaminated by the letter that killeth. The unlettered are more likely to look within towards the eternal truth, which is the root of knowing at the core of their spiritual being. Neo-pagans, although they may read and write, stay clear of all intellectual activities and academic pursuits. They develop their inner being instead, through union with the tutelary divinity, the source of their innate genius. Genius is an individual proposition, established by those integral human beings who have sought, by way of yoga and contemplation practices, to improve their inwardly known, keenly felt spiritual consciousness. This divine interconnectedness takes place at the inmost center and flows outward with the truth that abides in the fullness of spiritual consciousness, in which the integral human being is immersed and with which he or she is imbued. The 7 essential cosmic attributes bring about an entry from within and never from without. Integral human beings test their cognitive powers by way of their own spiritual consciousness, of which the divided human beings know nothing. 5 senses, which are common to most human beings, are enhanced by the uncommon spiritual senses of those few who have evolved a spiritual consciousness. Spiritual consciousness is an incorporeal, impersonal, non-physical teacher of righteousness, which is the immanent Godhead as well as transcendent Godhead. The Godhead is not loving and always forgiving, rather it is love and always giving. Love is the imprisoned splendor made ineffectual by the mortal minds of restricted personalities who devised hate. Hate is the fabrication of divided human beings whose foolish desires bedevil the life out of them. These restricted personalities can never know love because they insist upon falling into infatuation, which is nothing but an emotional reaction to a desired object. Love, however, is a spiritual response to a cherished subject. All integral human beings continue to ascend into this splendor of release because love is no longer imprisoned within. This all-embracing splendor is a coagulant which holds the created creation into a single unified whole. Only integral human beings know the love that fulfills, the truth that frees, and the wisdom that secures, because this inmost splendor has effected an entry into their consciousness. The vast disparity between integral human beings and divided humanity lies in the difference between the splendor released and the splendor still imprisoned. The masses of humanity are suffering the herd instinct, which is really not an instinct at all, but is an emotional intellectual dependency upon one another. This neurotic dependency plagues the solitary human as well as the collective humanity, who have not evolved a spiritual consciousness. The majority seek the solution to their problems through consulting one another for direction in their lives, rather than going to the inmost center where the truth that solves all problems abides in fullness. The spiritual consciousness abides in the inmost center of all creatures. It needs simply to be released so that the fire of inspiration can flow into awareness and warm us with the caress of grace. The seeds of rapture will burst their pods and spring forth into the full growth of divine intervention. The all-embracing kingdom of harmony springs forth from this inmost center. It does not flow in from external causes, no matter how knowledgeable. The actualization of spiritual consciousness requires that the seeker, after this merited grace, is obliged to develop the aptitude to fix the mind upon the inmost center. The mind that is steadfast upon the spirit that giveth life can never be affected by the letter that killeth. Such a mind shall know a peace that is beyond the comprehension of mortal minds. A spiritualized mind has no boundaries, because after the final breakthrough, there are none. The final breakthrough propels the awareness of integral human beings into the stillness on the other side of the silence, which opens a way at the inmost center, thereby effecting entry for the divine light of the spiritual consciousness coming from the transcendence of the Godhead to give birth to the immanence of the Godhead. The natural spiritual rhythmicity of all integral human beings is an extraordinary state of being consciousness bliss, simply because each of them in their turn abandon themselves to the kingdom of harmony within. They close their eyes of flesh and proceed into the still dark silence of a mind that is quiet and at peace, and wait upon the movement-like sound of the universal knowledge. It floods their beings with the spiritual consciousness necessary for directing them in their daily affairs. They may stop at this infinite well of knowledge at any moment to seek refreshment and guidance by simply being still. They stop, they look, they listen. And once they see and hear the still voice, they start again and proceed in exact accord with the will to power of their tutelary divinity. They feel the revered movement of spirit which emanates from them. They see its divine light which radiates in them, and they hear its sacred sound which vibrates as them. In fact, these integral human beings, because of the actualization of spiritual consciousness, are each exemplary representatives of the Godhead. They are in tune with the infinite and at one with the eternal, within the here-now ultimate reality. They are the great illusionists who create the great illusion as an effect, inasmuch as they are free from all spatial temporal restrictions placed in the mortal mind of restricted personalities who are bound by the mundane law of cause-effect. As prisoners of space and bondage to time, these divided minds make a mundane choice, which is cause, while the effect becomes the mortal chance. In other words, choice is cause and chance is effect, which is the trial and error activity of reactive conditioned mortal minds. The integral human beings, because they have developed the ability to respond to the spiritual consciousness of the Godhead, do not make choices, so they need not take chances. Having transcended the mundane law of cause-effect, these integral human beings merely follow the line of least resistance and simply go with the change. With their unconditional, uncommitted, unrestricted minds fixed upon the will of the indwelling tutelary divinity, these integral human beings act with the infallible directives coming into their holistic awareness from the unerring spiritual consciousness of the Godhead. The simple act of letting go and letting be is freedom from ego attachments, never again to be in bondage to the self-conscious personality, which restores the integral human being to the innocence of wisdom once more. The awareness that all is in the Godhead, and that the Godhead is in all, brings with it the innermost realization of at one meant, completely sundered from conceptualized duality. This is the death of the illusory ego self of personality that established the awareness of the indivisibility of individuality, inasmuch as the immanence of spirit is bound fast to the transcendence of spirit within the solitary Godhead. Integral human beings are each in their turn fully aware that the I am that I am is entirely within the Godhead, and that the Godhead is entirely within the I am that I am. With this ultimate reality fully realized, there is no longer a problem to be solved, and there is nothing left but to experience life fully through the joy of expressing the love of existence, awareness, bliss. Anyone who desires peace must leave others alone and do not meddle in externals. Tend to the internal wrongs and confine oneself to creative action alone. If others are wrong, let them correct the error of their ways. Understanding is the realization that everything is correct just the way it is, and neither right or wrong. Cease to cherish opinions concerning the way things should be, and feel secure in the outcome. Realize that there is no need for striving, that goals are not necessary, possessions are not essential, because within the spiritual consciousness, which is the only true consciousness, the Creator-created creation is complete, and a natural spiritual rhythm already permeates the earth with harmony. If this is not apparent, awareness is deluded by what seems to be, because selfish desire, chronological time, and conceptualized duality is plaguing the mind with the mortal affectations. Complete impartiality as a joyful state of supreme indifference, living at the equable interface of the universal mind, is to be free from attraction and repulsion, condemnation and condolement. Yet this impartiality and indifference is softened by an understanding heart and unconditional love. Marcus Aurelius knew well the fruits of impartiality, as this statement reveals. Be satisfied with your business, and learn to love what you were bred to. And as to the remainder of your life, be entirely resigned, and let the gods do their pleasure. I will end with a beautiful little poem from Robert Browning. He said, "Truth is within ourselves. There is an inmost center in us all, where the truth abides in fullness, and to know rather consists in opening out a way whence the imprisoned splendor may escape, than in effecting entry for a light supposed to be without." I thank you very much.